I was just sitting here doing some research and taking some notes. I was just taking some notes and still just researching cell biology, study of cells and their properties. But what interests me today, I'm a little tired. I've been at this all day practically. What what interests me is viruses. Just I was looking at virus like different organisms, bacteria, archaebacteria, uh, fungi. But I can't. I was looking at viruses, and it's interesting because I just like came across this today that a virus is not considered an organism because organisms are individual entities that have life form. Viruses don't possess. There's two types of cells that form all life form. The cells are the basic units of all living things: prokaryote and eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Uh, Interestingly enough, every organism has cells. Viruses don't have cells. They don't have a cell membrane. They're not multi or unicellular. So there there's an argument that they are organisms. There's cases made for them being organism, and then there are cases made against them being organisms, considered living organisms. So anyhow, what I found was interesting is this. I want to share this because I just think this is like really heavy stuff, right? And again, like I said, every information that I come across, I always try to tie it into how I can use it in my own life, right? But a virus, right? A virus cannot survive on its own. I'll say that again. A virus cannot replicate, it cannot multiply, it has no sustainability on its own. It is necessary for a virus to reproduce or to produce its kind, it needs a host. Hence why it lives inside of our bodies, right? So outside of a host, a virus cannot. It's unsustainable. It's not viable. And what's interesting is, for instance, a virus, let's say HIV, right? Human immunodeficiency virus, the HIV, right? That that virus attacks what's called the CD4 cells. CD4 cells, or it's also called T cells. CD4 cells or T cells are cells that actually make up our immune system to fight it. It's the body's defense mechanism. But the immunodeficiency virus, HIV, actually attacks. It latches on. It latches on. It's interesting. It latches on to every cell. Again, has a membrane. So the CD cell's membrane, it latches onto the membrane's receptor. Once it latches onto the receptor, a virus has to take over the host. That's what it does. It takes over the host, right? So it takes over the host. Once it takes over the host, interestingly enough, what a virus is, first, real quick, what a virus is, essentially what it is, I told you what it isn't. It isn't a life organism. It isn't a living organism. But what it is, it's genetic information. It's genetic information, and it's considered retrovirus or retroviral, because for us, you and I, our information is in our DNA and it's transcribed into RNA, mRNA, tRNA, and so on and so forth, and then encoded into proteins. But for a virus, it's not. It's reverse. It's RNA. This is why it's called retroviral or retrovirus, because it's RNA, and the RNA is converted to DNA for viruses. So it's like the opposite for us. But what's interesting is that a virus is just genetic information, right? The same way you and I have a genome, which is all of our genetic information. A virus is genetic information. So in essence, it's information. Once it gets into a cell by means of a latch into a receptor, it, like I said, it takes over the cell. It gets within the cell. Once it gets in the cell, it's penetrated the cell. It goes within the cell's nucleus. It takes over the nucleus of the cell. Because remember, the nucleus of the cell is where all the work takes place, where all the building takes place, right? Within the nucleus, there's a station or a department or a subunit that's called, damn, what's the name of it? I can't remember. A ribosome. Ribosome. Yeah, ribosome. Ribosome are like, consider them like the assembly lines where manufacturing is done. So once the RNA gets into the nucleus, it's converted to DNA. This is the virus. Once the virus converts its RNA to DNA, remember, it's all information. It fuses with with the DNA, the original DNA that's already inside of the nucleus of the cell. It fuses with that. So what it does is, by fusing, the virus is it's viral, it's infected. It infects the cell by fusing with the cell's original DNA. So in other words, what it's doing is what our cells do anyway. It starts to encode. It starts to encode its genetic information into the original cell and overrides that cell's original information. So here's what I found interesting. What the cell does now, once it has been infused and infected by this virus, the cell begins to do what it does naturally. It starts to do what? Replicate. It starts to multiply, divide. It starts to reproduce. Because it doesn't start. Let me rephrase that. It doesn't start. It continues, because that's what cells do. Cells replicate. So it continues to replicate and produce more of its own kind. However, unlike reproducing, and replicating its original product, it's now replicating and producing the infected product, right? So now your body is starting, the cells in your body are reproducing themselves, but unfortunately now they're tainted, so to speak. They're poisoned. So they're replicating an infected cell, and this is how you get sick, whether it's cold, whatever, in this case we use HIV. This is how AIDS it replicates so much to a point where it becomes AIDS at some point. But that's pretty much just a simple point of how it works. I just thought that was interesting, right? Because what I also learned from that is something like, okay, so that's how the laws of attraction works. That's what I think anyway. That's how the laws of attraction work. I studied a lot about the laws of attraction as well. And I've never seen it in this through this lens. Like, okay, a virus latches onto a cell, takes over that cell, fuses with that cell, infiltrates that cell, and then the cell does what it normally does, which is what? To reproduce. That's what our cells do every day. Meiosis, mitosis, self-replication. So the cell begins to replicate, and then also, again, that's our positive feedback loop, right? The more something is created, the more of a product a system creates, the more the system creates the product. And that's what's happening. So the cell is replicating, creating more of what it was given. That's how the laws of attraction work, I think. Yeah, it makes sense to me. So when you want something and you put whatever it is you want inside of your mind, your heart, or whatever, your body, your cells naturally produce the situation you want. In this sense, though, it wouldn't be your cells, it would be your frequencies. Yeah, it would be frequency matching, because we all resonate. Well, let me not go down. That's a whole different branch of science. So let me not go down there. But yeah, I can see the laws of attraction through biology as well. I already know how it works through physics. I know exactly how the laws of attraction works through physics, but now I'm starting to see how it works, even looking at it from a biological standpoint. But I don't want to, that's not the purpose. I'm not here to talk about that. But yeah, so viruses cannot survive on their own. They need a host, and they can't reproduce on their own. They need a host to reproduce. And I just thought that was something I'd like to share with you guys who's interested. Like, if there's people in your lives that are viruses, you got to get rid of them. That's something you got to be mindful of. If there's people in your lives that are using you as their hosts, they can't survive on their own. They can't maintain their own survivability. They can't produce on their own. They can't, do anything on their own. They need a host. And the interesting thing is once the virus takes over the host, which is the cell, once it uses the machinery of the cell, because remember, a virus doesn't have a cell on its own, so it needs a cell. And the reason why it needs a cell, because the cell has the ribosome. And like I told you, the ribosome is like the workstation, the work site where things get manufactured. Proteins are manufactured. So the virus, put it like this, the virus has the instructions. It has the DNA and the RNA. It has the genetic information to construct the protein, right? But it doesn't have the ribosome. It doesn't have the machinery needed to construct the protein. So that's why it takes over the cell and uses the apparatus or the tools, or it uses the manufacturing, the machinery. It uses the machinery of the cell to manifest its own protein, which is poisonous, obviously, right? It's a virus. So it's poisonous. It's noxious, right? So it's interesting because, like I said, it just makes you realize like there's people in your lives who can't. They need you as their host. They have to live off of you, right? They have to use your resources. They have to use your energy. Sometimes it's just energy. They have to use your energy to get themselves going. So be careful of that, because that means a virus by nature is the definition of a parasite. Yeah, because that would mean a virus is parasitic, because that's what parasites do. Parasites need a host, and a virus needs a host. So there's people in your lives that are parasitic. You got to be mindful of that. Friends, spouses, and or family. Be very careful of that. Of people feeding off of your energy, your machinery to provide for themselves. Now, also, one more quick point. When the virus is finished with the host that it originally took over and produced a product, its gene product, expressed its protein, its genetic information, which is a virus, it kills that cell. This is why the immune system breaks down in your body, because it kills the host. And once it kills the host, it's now on its own, right? It's gone, it's out, it's left. It leaves that host and in search of a new host. So once the virus is in your body, it produces its own kind. Now that virus that was produced goes out in your body still and look for more neighboring cells that are host to do the same, and the cycle continues, But the interesting thing is, though, the host dies. So once they get what they want out of you, you're dead. You see what I'm saying? Once the virus gets what it needs, it kills the host and moves on. That's how people are. So be mindful, be careful. Once they suck you dry and get what they need from you, you're dead. You know what I'm saying? They move on. So just be mindful of that. Just a little stuff that I'm researching and coming across. A little bit of information that I'm coming across. I got some notes here. I'm on my cook. I'm cooking. Always cooking. Always. If you don't know where I'm at, if you don't see me, just know wherever I'm at, I'm cooking. Always in the kitchen. Always in the fucking kitchen. That's my job. That's what I do.